Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this SU-152. This is a 15mm scale, or 1/100th scale if you prefer, snapped together plastic kit by Zvezda, which, if you can see the box, shouldn't be surprising. This is not to be confused with the Zvezda SU that I did way back in 2017, which feels like about 30 years ago. They are similar vehicles of course, but they're really quite different. Anyway, the back of the box has 3 images of the completed model at different angles, an exploded diagram to be used as instructions, and the rest of the information you would expect to see on a Zvezda box like this, such as length being 9cm, which is a touch over 3 freedom units, and the part count which is 13, so not that many parts. Those 13 parts come on 2 sprues in a nice dark green coloured plastic. This kit isn't the most recent offering from Zvezda, I think it's from 2016, and their newer kits do seem to include more parts with a bit more detail, but this is still pretty good looking, and has better detailing than their earliest kits. It's obviously not super detailed or anything like that, but this is a snap together gaming piece, and generally we don't buy those for their extreme detail. The detail here is rather good, and I would say a little bit finer than you might see on a Flames of War kit for example, which do tend towards being slightly chunky. Not that that's a bad thing, it's just different. The weakest point is of course the tracks, where the tread detail is very much simplified. That is pretty much the standard for these kits, and at this scale I don't think it matters that much. What does matter is that all of these parts are well moulded. They're neat and tidy, and you won't need to do a whole lot of cleanup during assembly. Normally, these Zvezda kits have a slip of paper with an assembly diagram, but not this time. That's okay though, the instructions are on the back of the box. Okay, so let's put this thing together. The first step, well, there doesn't seem to be a particular order in which these things should be done, but this seemed like the logical first step to me, so I begin by attaching the track sets to the lower hull. There's a variety of guide pins here to help position these. I had to apply a bit of pressure to get the parts all the way together, which isn't surprising, being that it's intended for that friction to hold the parts together without glue. Still, I added glue because I want the parts to stay together, and I can't imagine at any point I'm going to want to take this apart again. Obviously there's a track set for either side, and they do look pretty good. Not so much the tread detail, but from the sides they do look pretty good. Next, why not drill out the gun barrel? At this scale, a 152mm gun barrel is pretty easy to drill out without too much risk of damaging it. Because I was too lazy to put a slightly larger drill bit in, I widened the opening with my knife. This is a pretty simple thing to do, and obviously it is optional, but I think it really adds a lot to the model. I then attached the upper hull part. There are some guide pins which guide this into place, as you might expect. Again, I had to apply pressure to get the parts together, but that's neither surprising nor difficult. Some glue to hold things together and we've got ourselves a nice lower hull, clearly based on the KV hull. Now, let's have some casemate action. First, I attached the inner mantlet part. I'm not confident that this would stay on with friction alone, but that's okay. As you saw before, I have glue. That ought to hold it. The gun comes next. It's not too hard to get into place, though I will admit that I was slightly confused about how it slots into place at first. Poor easily confused Herbert. It's really not that hard at all. Once that's on, the outer mantlet part can then be slid over it and into place. There's a little bit of keying to line this up nice and neat, and you probably won't be surprised to see me adding a bit more glue. Glue for the glue god, as they say. Next, it's time to add the casemate to the hull. This was probably the most tricky part to get into place. To avoid a gap at the front, I had to sit the front of the casemate inside the hull part, and then I had to use a fair bit of pressure to push the guide pin into its socket, which has caused a stress mark in the plastic on the roof, as you can see there. It could certainly be worse though, and you won't know it's there once the primer goes on. The model is almost done. The final thing to do is add the fuel tanks. There are very obvious guide pins to mount these on, and it's pretty easy to do. Just make sure that you're putting them on the right way. The angled support thing should face the hull. Simple. If you want, I suppose you could omit some of these tanks. You would just have to remove the guide pins. I think it looks more interesting with the fuel tanks on though. And with that, the Zvezda snapped together SU-152 in 15mm scale is now completed. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out. I've always thought these giant assault guns were pretty cool. I mean, who doesn't like a big derp gun after all? This little model is a fair representation of the SU-152, and while it's obviously not super detailed as I said before, it's not intended to be. It is a wargaming piece, and not a display model, though if you wanted, there's nothing wrong with using it in a display or a diorama. When you are looking at this on the tabletop, that lack of detail isn't all that important, and you can always make up for some of that with painting and weathering. All that said, I do think it looks pretty good, and I enjoyed building it quite a bit. These snap kits from Zvezda are usually quite fun, plus you can see the end result nice and fast, so you get that instant gratification thing. And if you do happen to need a swarm of these for your game, it's nice to not have to dedicate a week solid to build them. Speaking of building, I built this on my stream. If you want to watch me building models live and join in the chat with myself and the good folks in chat, head on over to twitch.tv/Herbert_Erpaderp, or you could follow the convenient link in the description. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put those in the comments section below. That's what it's for. And if you've built this kit and you would like to share some pictures, why not drop by our Discord community and share there? It could be any model, really. The Discord isn't only for pictures of SU-152s. That would be silly. If you haven't done so already, why not subscribe, follow, ring the bell, become a patron or YouTube member, or maybe just come say hi on Discord or Twitch. Links to all of my things are in the description below, and as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other, and thank you for watching. Farewell.